In today's world, we are increasingly dependent on technology. Our business and personal lives rely on it, but as you've probably noticed, it's unreliable. They promise it'll get better, but it usually gets worse. Our computers are slow, so we end up squinting at smartphones and tablets. We live in constant fear that something's going to happen to our personal data, so we're scared into paying for fake protection that proves useless when disaster strikes. Update attacks, fake Wi-Fi, cloud control, and other industry scandals are designed to keep the money flowing. The jokers we pay to fix our stuff have no clue what they're doing, so they do a virus scan and then wipe out our precious photos. Intelligent, successful people feel intimidated by the chaos and think it's somehow their fault. If they only knew what the industry was doing to them, they'd get torches and pitchforks. If only we had someone to explain it all in plain English so we can start protecting ourselves. Oh wait, we do! It's the Computer Exorcist Podcast with your host, Marc Anthony Arena.
From the Wallace Memorial microphone in my home office, overlooking the hills of Western New York. My name is Marc Anthony Arena, and this is the Computer Exorcist Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today. I have a very, very, very special guest today. I admire him so greatly. He's my buddy, and he is Jim the Internet Plumber. He is an expert in all of this security stuff, so he's just going by Jim the Plumber today, and you guys are going to love him. He's never been on the show, and he's just such a great guy. Jim, how are you?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on the show. I take caution hearing you call me an expert. You know, I like many other people out there, just have gained my experience from, you know, hands-on day-to-day activities with the nightmares that you find on the internet. So if that makes me an expert, maybe I'll take that title from you, but I'm not sure.
I gotcha. It's a disclaimer. Yeah, but you're quite brilliant, and that much we can say.
Well, thanks. Right back at you, Mark. I always love chatting with you. It's one of the most engaging and enjoyable conversations I have throughout the year.
And you know, you and I have our quarterly talks, right? Where, you know, when I started my business, I just felt like, you know, this lone wolf, this guy out there who's trying to save the world, and I didn't have any allies, right? All the other computer dudes, people said, why don't you go find another computer guy and team up with? I said, no, because they're all jokers and they have no clue what they're doing. But finally, later on, I was able to team up with some friends who really are not only knowledgeable and have updated knowledge on this stuff, but also, importantly, are in it for the customer, right? I always say that a lot of dudes are on the opposite side of the desk as you. They're representing the industry, and they're there to get a quota. They're there to get a commission off of you. But the guys I team up with are people who are on your side. We're on your side, on the consumer's side of the table, and we're protecting you from overkill products and overkill services. And so every quarter or so, Jim and I will have a talk and just express to each other what we've encountered. Like, oh, I just saved this client from some ridiculous thing that they didn't need at all. And it's quite therapeutic to be able to commiserate with each other. You agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so much fun to find there's a redeeming value in just hearing, you know, a small business, a mom and pop, the appreciation in their voice when they find out, you know, that you're going to be either saving them money or giving them the straight story, and and it's a breath of fresh air for them, and they love it. And I guess maybe that's what we live for, right?
Exactly. That's what we live for. That's the point of all of this, right? That's why we learn technology, and it's so we can be a bridge between the tech world and the normal people. Two of my favorite examples that I told you about over the years was one where a guy, successful small business owner, doesn't know anything about computers. He was paying $987 a month for a piece of garbage website made by someone who didn't care at all, and it was this garbage template and everything. And I got him set up for, he's paying $120 a year, let's say. Another guy, he was expecting to pay 10 grand, and I said, yeah, look, I mean, if you're some humongous business, maybe. I said, but you're just a small business. And so same deal. I got him way down, and he was so in shock. He couldn't believe it. I mean, it's sometimes we give people options that sound too good to be true. It's just because we're not out to gouge you.
Yeah, back in when I first started playing around with the internet and learning how all these things worked, I ended up, working with the monopolies back in the day, and that's really what motivated me, and really, even as a kid, programmed me just in my nature. When you see, like, back in the day, there was only one place you could get a domain from, and you also had to get your hosting from them. And then after a few years, you could then get your hosting from someone else. And then eventually the government stepped in and broke up the monopolies that controlled registering a domain name. And then that got spread out all over the place. Now there's a lot of different registrars. There's a lot of different hosting companies. But even back then, just finding a good deal was impossible. And as a kid who wanted to start a business, it was like I wanted to skip like the .com era kind of mentality. I wanted to skip the venture capitalism and just go right into making something that people wanted, that helped people from a piece of technology that people needed, and I just couldn't get all the logistics in place for what I thought was a reasonable price. And I thought, what's even better than getting that technology together would be finding a way to get these services and bypass the monopolies in the hands of like small businesses that can appreciate that value.
I had a client this week, and she had a website. Nothing worked. None of it was working at all. And I said, what happened? She goes, well, my computer guy told me that Google and GoDaddy are the only way to go. So he signed me up for GoDaddy, and I have email with Google, and none of it works. And she was all locked out of it. And the other very important thing is the dude vanished, of course, because all computer dudes vanish. And she didn't hear from him for 6 months, and finally he reappeared and said, oh, I can fix this. And he was all, dudes want people to depend on them, but then they vanish. They're undependable. So I said, look, we're going to liberate you. I got her to something else. And I said, look, you're in, like, she's a very sharp lady. And I said, look, you're in control. You're not a beginner. I'm going to put you in control, and you don't have to depend on any dude who vanishes, right? You'll have control over your own website. So we did that, but I thought to myself, why do dudes why do all these monopolies exist, right? In my book, I say this industry is replete with in-bred monopolies. And the answer is dudes are unoriginal. When you go to a computer guy and say you need something, what do? They default, oh yeah, we'll put you on GoDaddy and Google. They don't think about alternatives, right? In your restaurant industry, we're starting to talk about local food and farm to table and small business, right? But in my industry, it's just, I'm unoriginal. I'll just recommend the same thing everyone else is doing because there's nothing else besides Microsoft and Google.
That's awesome.
Right?
I'm hesitant to even touch on that because I think there's so many layers to that onion that we need to peel back. And I don't know if we have that much time, but we're talking about originality. We're talking about centralized data, big data, living in our lifetime. Probably you and most of your listeners have transitioned from where we were originally to what's called a surveillance state, and having all of our data stored up on the internet is I guess coalesces nicely with the initiatives of a surveillance state.
Yeah, we used to live, I guess we can call it the natural world, where we were free to roam the earth and do whatever we wanted. We frolicked like deer and gazelles, and now all of a sudden we're in this cloud-controlled world. And just because you sign up for a Gmail account and you think you're getting just a free email service, but actually there's billions of other things that they're doing to you. And it's the same thing with Apple, and it's the same thing with all of them. There's a lot more to it.
You're paying for it one way or another. I talk to folks all the time, and they're like, "Why would I pay for an email service?" And I say, "Well, you're paying for it no matter way you slice it. You can pay directly, a few bucks here, a few bucks there, $5 a month here, or you can
MailFence and Fast Mail and Reagan and Mail.com for $3 to $9 a month.
Or you can get the free stuff where they scrape through your email, going through keywords, trying to sell your data to big data, and really just you are selling your information. So it's, I guess, from a monetary standpoint, it's free, right? But from a cost standpoint, I don't think it's free.
Oh, and we could just do a whole episode on that, huh?
I know. That's what we got to rein this onion in, man. We'll fold those leaves, onion folds back up, and talk about something else.
All right. Well, and you're totally right here, because we could go on a lot of tangents. One side note: I was at a school last week, and even though they were near the hub for the really high-end internet provider in their neighborhood, they had next to nothing in their office. They had like 0.2 megabits. So it was next to nothing, right? You need, let's say, 10, 20 megabit to survive, and they were getting 0.2. Most of the time, it just didn't even bother working. And here they are with all these cloud services and web-based Google Docs, and they were dead in the water. So I went in there and put, I had a guy come in, do real Ethernet cords. I put real working wireless access points everywhere, and ripped out a lot of the fake stuff they had. And he goes, "Wow, this is great. This is blah blah blah." And I said, "Look, you're actually lucky, because you had some volunteers setting stuff up in this school." I said, "Most small businesses have the same chaos and heartache, but they paid some scumbag 10 or 20 grand for the privilege."
And then they also their annual contribution to the crypto ransomware guys through their insurance policy for a few $100,000. And
good point. And the dudes who charge them the fees. "I'm going to spend $100 a month for virus scanning fees." And I remember there was this law office. I'll never forget this. Scumbag came in, and he was so well dressed that they just signed a contract with him. He wanted $500 a month to do, and this was a couple years ago, for Adobe Flash and Java updates, which are automatic anyways. They paid this guy $500 a month. What's that?
They brought an end to life to Flash, right? It's done.
Yeah, Flash and Java are thankfully done, but and they were giant security holes and whatever. But and they also introduced legalized spyware into your machine whenever you accepted one of the updates. But anyway, this scumbag charged them $500 a month, but he had a nice suit on, so he got away with it.
That scene in Terminator 2 when John Connor's hacking the ATM, that was Java that those ATMs were running. Just
and again, I mean, in this case, I'm just boiling over because of this guy who was just milking them for fees, right? It's and here you and I feel bad for charging people, and we're always worried if we're overcharging them, and this dude was blatantly coming in there, right? And either he didn't know that Java and Flash were automatic, so he's incompetent, or he's malicious. He knew they were automatic, and he still just. And paying for protection? Yeah, I'll pay for protection, even if the protection doesn't protect you. Okay.
True.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. Do you want to do a couple articles here, Jim?
I mean, we can talk about, let's see, some of those topics you mentioned. We can touch on those.
And do you want to give me a little more of your background, or did you Did you cover that
No,
enough?
I mean, I'll come back on and we'll talk again, and I'll talk more about myself. I don't want to sound like a self. I don't want to sound like I'm obsessed with myself. But we'll keep it on the internet here.
Yeah, I got you. All right, well, yeah, here we go. So, all my guests on my show, when I get them on here, I start throwing articles at them. I'll read an article, and then I'll ask for your opinion about it. So, you're in the hot seat now. Here we go. This one here, and I've done these many times before, but every time I get one in the mail, I'm so furious I need to call them out on it. So there is a scam going around where an evil scam company sends you a letter in the mail that makes you think you need to renew a service with them, even though you don't have any existing relationship with them, and they do not provide anything useful. Okay, and there's a couple different ones out there, but this one is called domainnetworks.com. Okay, nice and generic. They got a pretty logo. Domainnetworks.com. If you see this or any other letters in the mail saying you need to renew something, and you know they're not your vendor, be extremely careful, okay? This is a scam where these people and others will send you a letter, and they'll make you think that, because they have public information, right? Like, just like your property taxes are public, so I could drive by your house and say, hey, yeah, you paid 10 grand last year, so, yeah, you need to renew, right? That's what these folks are doing. So they know your website, right? So they sent me a notice, and it says my website name, and it says the date, and then a fake invoice number, and it says description of services. Annual website domain listing, $289. Okay, domain listing is fake, right? Domain hosting is real, and domain name parking and all that, but domain listing... Okay, domain listing does not exist. So subscription includes annual domain business listing on domainnetworks.com. So other scams will actually hijack your name and you'll sign your website over to them, which is incredibly nefarious. These scumbags are just looking for a fake fee to have you listed on their fake Yellow Pages kind of directory. Okay, does that make sense so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they have a fake directory, basically a list of all their victims. So in theory, you and I could go on this. Yeah. Anyone can go on this site and just.
I never looked at it that way, but that's brilliant, Mark.
Thanks. That's. I just thought of that now as I'm reading this. It's like, oh wait, this is actually a list of the dumbest companies out there. Maybe we should call all those people on this list and say you've been duped.
Make a show out of it.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Oh,
I'm calling you live from the show here. We want to talk to you about some of the pitfalls of the internet. What are your thoughts?
And again, folks, you can't do a virus scan because this is an emotional sentence on a piece of paper. Okay, so in small letters, they say, this website listing offer is provided to leading websites, right? They're trying to flatter you. Leading websites throughout the U.S. to enhance their website exposure. Yeah, exposure on a list of people who were duped. And expose them to new customers through our directory, right? The only new customers who go there are probably ones who've been hijacked with a toolbar, and then these people pay the toolbar to steal the traffic and point it to their evil directory. We are not a domain registrar, and we do not register or renew domain names. Okay, at least they admit that there. And again, similar scams will actually hijack your name. And then they say this is not a bill, it's not a solicitation, you're under no obligation to pay, right? So they have to put that legally, but they know someone who's looking at this. Small business owners are busy, scatterbrained people. They're going to get this letter in the mail, they're going to see a dollar sign and a number and hand it to their secretary and, just pay this, right?
All right. So that, that domain renewal, domain listing thing, I've actually seen that before. Mm-hmm. And on some of the domains that I have subdomains that aren't like the normal www dot your domain. They're just like kind of like long, funky names. And those goofballs at these domain listing entities will send me like these giant envelopes with subdomains, and I get like 3 or 4 of them a week, I think.
What? That many?
And yeah, and because I've got a lot of different subdomains, and
right, so something
and
like lunchtime.technosophy.com or
exactly.
breakfast.technosophy.
Yep.
Okay, so it's something.yourwebsite.com.
And so they'll send me a thing saying, "Hey, we want to renew your domain and do your listing and all this stuff." I'm like, man, these people should get wise to the fact that they're just wasting, their postage. But chances are they make more money from the solicitation. And now, you wonder like, why don't you see these kind of scams in your email? And sometimes you do, but it's pretty rare that you see them in your email. But a few years back, there was they changed the laws. Like, I guess it was Congress and then the State Department got together and they said, let's make a law to stop spam. Because you know how you get a spam message and there's an unsubscribe link in it, and you're like, all right, I can click this link and I'll never get this junk mail again. Well, here's the caveat. That law that penalizes someone from contacting you, I'm not an expert on that law, but fundamentally it says, like, if you solicit someone by email that you're not supposed to, there can be a fine up to $10,000. Kind of like a cold call, like you're not allowed to cold call someone on a cell phone.
So they'd be hit with multiple fines of 10,000 apiece multiplied by whatever, right?
Right, and then they'd have a class action where they could settle for pennies on the dollar or something. But that's so if you have an email from someone outside the United States sending you spam and you've got an unsubscribe link, that link actually translates to, tell the scammers that you're a real email address and that you saw this message, and they don't have any obligation to remove you from the list.
Right, and that's a really, really good point. And I've been telling my clients this recently, because I had one lady call and she said, Mark, I click unsubscribe, and every time I do that, I get more and more and more and more and more spam. And I said, yeah, because, right, if you unsubscribe to Procter & Gamble or whatever, Arby's or something, that's fine. But if you click unsubscribe to anything else, yeah, they're going to say, hey, she's alive, and we're going to bombard her with more.
Exactly. So it's you have to be a conscious consumer in that regard. And if it is one of the places in the United States, then that's great, and you can like stop getting your coupons or whatever you're getting delivered to your inbox if you don't want them anymore. But that's probably why we don't see it in their in an email, because they would get lit up so fast by like the if you get fraudulent email, you can go right to the government and report that.
And I'm sure that
it's called the FBI IC3, yes. And there's like a form you fill out on the website, and you just kind of drop the information in, and they compile it all together and go after folks that are using the internet at scale.
Oh, so they shave off the worst ones, probably.
Oh yeah, well they got their quotas they got to meet, right?
So they focus on the worst ones. No, that's really interesting, but right, I mean, and I tell people, look, even if they made a law, tomorrow someone will come out with something different, so they'll just mail you these letters from another country or whatever they need to do. The only thing that's going to stop this stuff is awareness, right? Because the FBI can play whack-a-mole all day long, all they want, and the airhead politicians can call for reforms all they want, but the only thing that matters is if you get this letter and you say, I heard Mark and Jim talk about this and I know to throw it away. That's it. Human awareness.
Yep.
All right. You want to do one more quick article before we go? Yeah.
All socially engineered stuff. Yeah.
Emotional. Okay. So this one goes back to my large backlog of articles. December 2020, Microsoft reveals SolarWinds hackers were able to access its source code. Okay. And I did this show a couple weeks back. I did an episode about the SolarWinds hack, right? Where basically SolarWinds, another one of these in-bred monopolies that we don't even hear about. SolarWinds does something like 70% or some huge number. They have a humongous market share among large companies, right? So their hardware and software claim to protect large organizations. Great. But their ubiquity was their liability. Some bad guy broke into their software, and it's a connected, cloud-controlled software. So some bad guy broke into their stuff, and oh wow, now he's got control of all of the SolarWinds software and hardware among all of the clients ever, right? So that's a huge nightmare, and these jokers come up with this stuff. The jokers at SolarWinds just didn't ever realize that could be a bad thing, right? I mean, it's kind of like if I don't know, I'm trying to think of my analogies on the fly here, but let's say I controlled a fleet of cars, remote controlled, right? And then you broke into my office and then got my remote controller, and now you controlled that fleet, right? So that's what happened. So with SolarWinds, right, they claim to protect a bunch of large organizations. Fine. Someone breaks into SolarWinds and now controls all their clients. It gets worse, okay? So this article explains how it gets worse. The hacking group behind SolarWinds compromise was able to break into Microsoft and access some of the company's source code. And source code is like the recipe or the sheet music or the blueprints, right, for their software products. The company said its investigation has turned up irregularities with a small number of internal accounts, and one of the accounts has been used to view our source code. This adds to the ever-growing picture of the compromises associated with the SolarWinds hack, which used the company's flagship network monitoring software as a springboard to break into the sensitive U.S. government networks and other tech companies like Microsoft. Microsoft found malicious versions of SolarWinds software inside of its network, just like other firms out there. So Microsoft and other firms found malicious versions of the SolarWinds software lurking in their own stuff, right? Again, you trust SolarWinds. SolarWinds itself was hijacked. So now their clients are hijacked, right? By default or whatever. A company's source code is typically among its closely guarded secrets, right? It's the recipe, right? It's like if we found out the recipe for Coca-Cola, right? That's supposedly so closely guarded that only 3 people in the world know about it at any given time. It's kind of like that. Here's another very important thing. Microsoft said the hijacked account did not have the ability to modify our source code. That's really important. Okay, it's one thing, all right, it's one thing if someone broke into Coca-Cola and stole the formula for Coca-Cola, but it's another thing entirely if someone got in and modified the recipe so that all of a sudden the future products that are sold are modified, right? That would
Marc,
be really
you gotta try this. You gotta try this. Is there a taste of what was this? Raspberry in my Coke? I didn't order a raspberry Coke, did I?
Exactly, right? So what Microsoft is saying is luckily no one modified their garbage products. I mean, heck, if it'd probably be better if someone went in and modified their products. Microsoft stuff can't get any worse.
And you know what that probably translates into? We had a backup, and then we overrode all of their changes, and as a result, like the end result is there were no changes. So it's like PR
so
spin,
someone
right?
might have modified it, but then they fixed it, is what you're saying.
Right.
Whoa.
Because I mean, who's going to hack an account to a file system where you store all your source code, and they can't like, you know, buffer overflow your Samba or whatever, and not be able to get that far and not be able to change it.
Right. Wow. So to finish up, they say the investigation has also found no indications that our systems were used to attack others. That's another relief, or at least so far that they know. So no one hijacked Microsoft. So they hijacked SolarWinds to hijack Microsoft, but luckily they didn't hijack Microsoft to hijack anyone else. However, I, Marc Arena, beg to differ because I think that Microsoft systems are used to attack people, because they're attacking humanity with Windows 11. So that's enough of an attack for me. Jim.
Well, it's SolarWinds is a complicated piece of technology. There's a lot of layers to it. Again, we come back to the layers, but I perceive what it does as a necessity. If you look at alternatives, we could start with comparing some alternatives. There's software like Snort, which will look at packets and tell you if something weird's going on your network. And that's mostly free. There's other software that reads the same type of data flows that SolarWinds reads, and tells you what's going on your network. That is also free. They're open source projects, which come with their own risks. They're not commercially supported. Anybody can contribute potentially a backdoor to those things. But SolarWinds,
that whole opinion, like you could also closed source is even more of a backdoor because you have no idea.
Right. So then you want to go commercial, you want to pay, and the government is willing to pay to go commercial. So that's what you end up with. The Fortune 500 companies. You end up with the federal government. They're all going to get the latest and greatest commercially supported pay for use solution, and that is what SolarWinds is. And I tried SolarWinds out for a while to analyze some packet flows, and frankly, I was not impressed with its ability. I thought it stopped significantly short of a lot of the free alternatives.
Wow.
And so when I found out
some dude had a pop collar and played golf with some government executive and got the contract, right?
Hypothetically, right? Yeah, we could say that it could be, but it was not. So if I were going to recommend a solution to someone, I would consider recommending some of the open source free alternatives that are out there. But some things that a commercial solution gives you the ability to call them and say, "Hey, my infrastructure's on fire. Help me fix it." Right, and that's in short supply nowadays. Is having a phone number for someone you can call about a complex infrastructure problem. And if you're a paying subscriber to SolarWinds, there's a chance that maybe they're going to push out some libraries, some updates to you that will contain emerging threats to allow you to identify things on things that were once unknown that are now known, that will let you pinpoint various threats on your network. So there's probably some merit to going with them beyond what I'm aware of. Mm-hmm. But to in a world where nothing can be truly secured, it's bound to happen.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I just think that why would they remote control all their stuff? And I know it's the way of the future and that's where everyone's going, but I just think that if you actually care,
with Solar Flare, they give you have like a computer in your system or in your infrastructure, and that's your like command and control node for managing their suite of products. Mm-hmm. And that piece of software is what's going to it's going to use your computational your computing power to run the numbers, tie into all of your different network segments, and kind of just like sift through everything and read. It's going to have extremely low level access. And they talked about that with a lot of these data breaches lately. Like, why did Snowden have access to everything? Why did this new guy here, I forget his name. Why did someone who's like only worked here for a few years, who's so young, have access to everything? Mm-hmm. And the truth is, like, to accomplish these tasks, you really do need low level access to analyze the packet flow. So some network guy somewhere needs to see everything to be able to calculate, the hashes on these transactions,
right? Which flies in the face of that zero trust garbage, where organizations are saying we're not going to trust any of our employees with any logins or any information or anything ever. That's what zero trust in a nutshell.
So they try to like add these layers of security and say, oh, well, this guy can only access this menu and this guy can only access this menu. But at the end, someone's got to install the whole thing, right? And put it in place. So that guy is going to have access to everything. So updates to the system, you're going to want those updates. Otherwise, you're not going to know what emerging threats exist in your network.
There's got to be a way to
active,
do it then.
Like botnets.
So this control node, SolarWinds can push something out without, that's
Right. So then SolarWinds software sits on this control node in your infrastructure with access to everything, and it says, "Hey, I need the latest things to update, so I know what to look for to keep you safe." And if so it sounds like, I guess it was FireEye found that the software was, they were running SolarWinds somewhere in their infrastructure, and they found that it was communicating with places it shouldn't, and as a result, they were able to pin down that there was a backdoor in the SolarWinds software.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound familiar?
I think,
but that was a long time ago.
It just blows my mind that, it's hugely ironic, right? You hire a firm to protect you, but they are the hole in your organization, right? They are the security hole.
Well, if you subscribe to the federal government's security advisories, which most people are never going to do, I read them, and I don't lose sleep, but it's terrifying to see what's out there. From like the web browsers, whether you're running Internet Explorer from yesteryear, or Edge, or Firefox, or Chrome, or Safari, Android devices, Apple devices, the whole gambit. It's like, what week is it? Because any given week, Microsoft, Apple operating system, like, they're all vulnerable. You just go to the wrong website and bam, they've got, they've rootkitted your computer, or ratted your computer, however you want to call it. So the trick is you have to, like, and I know you and I talk about the complexities and the benefits versus the what would you call it? The downfalls, the risks, the risks of having Windows Update. Because certainly I have computers in my life that update, and I just like want to pull my hair out, and I'm like, oh, for the love, like, why is this thing not working again for the 15th time? Oh, it's the second Tuesday of the month. Well, that's why. And then
it just blows my mind. If you want to do an update, fine, but why does every update have to be made by a slob and fix one thing and break 10 things?
So SolarWinds is in the same boat, where they're providing a service, providing a feature, a technology, a solution, and just like everyone else, their software is limited by the underlying system that it runs on, and it runs on Windows, it runs on Linux, right? And you're gonna and I should, to be fair, when I went through the hit list there of all the security problems, Linux has its problems too, and it's had some pretty big ones in the past. So, again, in a world where nothing is secure, we're going to run into these. We're going to run into these things time to time, and I don't know. Was the FBI director of the FBI, I think, said it? He said, there's two types of businesses in the United States. There's businesses that know they've been hacked by the Chinese, and there's businesses that don't know they've been hacked by the Chinese.
Wow. Just like that.
That about sums it up, right?
Wow. So, and that right there, that's enough to, I'll think about that in the shower tomorrow morning. Wow, that's just enough to ponder. The only thing I'm not a macro level cybersecurity guy, right? I deal with senior citizens who get emotional scam phone calls. That's my deal, right? And I tell cybersecurity guys this, like, look, you've got your world and my world's totally different, and the threats that happen in my world are stuff that's totally different from what you're dealing with. But anyway, if I were a large company, I would probably, after knowing all this, I would probably end up using Snout and keeping it local. Right? Instead of having some SolarWinds charge me a fortune for monthly fees and to control my entire gosh darn system remotely, and think that somehow that's a good idea. Any business that's that big enough to worry about this can afford to have a dude on call, an in-house guy who they can call. Well.
Yeah, there's no good answer, but it is what it is.
Well, and again, you know what I say too? Like, I get it. I don't want to say this, but yeah, Linux might be imperfect, as much as I glorify it and say Linux is perfect. For me, it's the least insecure of anything, right? Whenever all the time, I tell my clients, look, there are no good products in my industry. I just recommend the least bad ones.
Like there was a time when I got an email, I think in the last 10 years from the feds about their advisories, and you could literally connect to SSH, a remote access port on any Linux machine. And because of a bug in the bash script or the shell script that it starts, you would just, and again, maybe not any, but like most, right? We're talking a majority of the installs out there. It would just give you root access, like a terminal with root access, because you'd put a funky character into the login process. So
wow.
it boggles the mind.
Right. So I could basically, you're saying in layman's terms, you could just break into any machine easily, just dial it up and walk in and say, hey, right, I'm the boss. And there you go.
And you wonder why those things are there. How do those things get there? Like, it's got to be someone put that there on purpose, right?
It's either on purpose or they're just that sloppy. I mean, this stuff innately is too ultra complex. Right? If I look at my apartment has one door, right? And I also have a porch that theoretically I could jump off of if there was a fire or something, right? But that's it. I have an entry door and a porch. That's it. Why do these products have billions and zillions of holes all over them? That's what I don't get.
I think you know the answer.
Complexity, which makes problems, and then people depend on them, right? So is it like the Xerox model where, Xerox was successful because they made ultra complex products that required a secondary sub-industry of repair guys who would then come in and milk you for repair fees? Is that right?
Yeah, it could be. It very well could be.
That's my thought. And until Fuji came along and made products that worked, and Toshiba made copiers that worked, right? And that's my hope, is that someday someone's going to come along and make a product that works, and then people will say, wow, we don't have to put up with this garbage and these repair fees anymore. And the fear. How about the fear as well?
Well, you ask yourself, why did the federal government ban Huawei equipment in the United States?
Oh, Huawei. Right. And
why did they do that? And then you flip that on its head, and then there you got your answer to our whole conversation.
Wow. And I'll argue that Samsung should be banned as well. I mean, they record everything you say if you have a Samsung TV. They have unremovable bloatware in their phones that I can't even rip out. I argue that they should be banned as well, but that's just me. I
don't know. How am I going to watch Dancing with the Stars?
Watch it on any other brand ever. I watched it the other day, actually. Or no, I watched that other one, American Idol. So, well, thank you so much, Jim the Plumber. Any last thoughts before we go? I'd love to have you on anytime, and we could always do a follow-up episode if you got time.
I always love chatting with you, Mark. We'll certainly be back to come chat with you guys, and I hope your week goes good here, and everything is rolling smoothly for you and all your listeners out there.
All right. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you later.
Take care, guys. Sacrifice